Given his own commitment to the professional ideals of journalism and his unique perspective from inside the church, we are delighted to have him share his viewpoints with us this evening. So please join me in welcoming Mr. John Allen.
I mean, if you ever need an illustration of the power of a narrative in driving the way the media covers someone who's in the news, I mean, there it is in full living color. Pope Benedict had the historic misfortune of coming into office with a bad narrative. I mean, you know, he was seen, you all know what people said about him when he was elected, right? That this was God's Rottweiler, right? This was her Panzer Cardinal. This was the German Shepherd, right? I mean, he was basically the Darth Vader of the Catholic Church. I mean, honest to God, I've been in CNN production meetings when the name came up and you could hear the Imperial Death March from Star Wars echoing in people's heads. Francis had the historical great fortune of not coming into an office with a prefabricated narrative. He had the opportunity to frame it for himself, and he's done it brilliantly. Which means that now he is the humble, simple, maverick man of the people. That's the way the media looks at him, and that therefore everything that happens that supports that narrative will be amplified. Anything that does not will be ignored. I mean, look, two things. You know, part of the construction of that narrative about Francis, it all happened very quickly, but one of the critical moments, the day after his election, okay, he goes back to the Castle del Clero, which was the residence in Rome he'd been staying at before the conclave. He packs his own bag, he pays his own bill, he chats with the guys working at the desk, right? And then he goes back to the Santa Marta. And this all gets played up as populous, people-loving, man, ordinary guy, right? Do you know what Benedict did the day after his election? He went back. Now, of course, he'd been living in Rome, so he wasn't staying in a hotel, right? He's living there. He went back to his apartment in the Piazza Leonina to pack his own bag and carry it himself across St. Peter's Square back to the Apostolic Palace. And before he left, he went around and knocked on the doors of the 4 other cardinals who lived in that building, not to say goodbye to the cardinals, because he knew he'd be seeing them again, but to say goodbye to the nuns who did the cooking and cleaning in those apartments, because he knew them by name. He knew who their families were. He knew when their birthdays were. And he wanted to thank them for being such good neighbors. Now, question. Why does the first story about Francis become part of the legend, and the second story about Benedict, which was actually first in time, of course, but the story about, why does that get ignored? Because the Benedict story defied the narrative, and the Francis story supported the narrative. That's the power of narrative at work. Look, I think what you're really asking is the image that comes across of Francis in settings like that, is that the real guy? I would say yes, but it's not all of the real guy. Okay, I mean, here's the thing. The humility and the simplicity, yeah, that's not a faux PR exercise. That's the real man. If you want a 5-star banner headline, dare not forget it, insight about Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the man who is now Pope Francis, here it is, ladies and gentlemen, full living color. Never forget that beneath that humble, simple exterior lies the mind of a brilliant Jesuit politician. Okay? He knows what he is doing all of the time, and he is very calculating about it. So there are aspects of himself that you don't generally get glimpses of in public, but you know if you know the man. For example, there is a steely toughness about this man that doesn't often come across. I mean, you see him in public, you know, putting on the sombrero or kissing the baby or whatever, or drinking mate, and, you know, you could think this is a soft guy, right? There is a hardness about him that can sometimes translate, quite frankly, into being extraordinarily stubborn, even in the face of contrary evidence. He thinks carefully, he consults widely, he prays deeply before he makes decisions. But once that decision is made, God help you, okay? There is no going back. So that toughness, I think, doesn't come through. I think also, the other side of him that you often don't see publicly, but is very real, is the sophistication of his mind. I mean, because so often he will just kind of let things play out, let things hang out, and he will shoot from the hip. People will sometimes sloppily say, the difference between Benedict and Francis is that Benedict was a theologian and Francis was a pastor. As if Benedict wasn't pastoral, which is completely untrue. But B, as if Francis doesn't have a deep reservoir of intellectual muscle to draw upon too. I mean, read his interviews with Spadaro. This guy will draw references to classic literature or classic works of art, and he will have developed insights into the meaning of those things that clearly reflect a rich lifetime of thought. I mean, he is a very deep thinker, I think, and that doesn't always come through too. Okay, thank you. It's been a blast here tonight.